Carlos Martinez adjusted his security cap as the evening breeze swept across the Camp Nou entrance. The familiar weight of his badge pressed against his chest, a simple piece of metal that had become his pride over 15 long years. At 50 years old, his back ached more than it used to, but his smile remained as genuine as the day he first walked through these gates looking for work. The sun was setting behind the massive stadium, casting long shadows across the concrete, where thousands of fans would soon gather. Carlos checked his watch and nodded to himself. 2 hours before kickoff meant 2 hours to ensure everything was perfect. This was his routine, his ritual, his way of showing respect to the club that had given him purpose when he needed it most. He remembered that first day clearly. His construction career had ended abruptly when a steel beam fell and crushed 3 vertebrae in his lower back. The doctor said he would never do heavy lifting again. The workers' compensation barely covered his medical bills, and with Maria, his wife, working part-time at a local grocery store, money became tighter than a drip. They had 2 children in university and a mortgage that seemed to grow larger each month. The job posting at FC Barcelona had been simple. Security guard needed for stadium events. Experience preferred but not required. Carlos had never worked security before, but he understood hard work and dedication. During his interview, the hiring manager asked him why he wanted to work at Camp Nou. Carlos answered honestly that he needed the job to support his family, but he also admitted something deeper. He had been a Barcelona fan since he was 7 years old, watching games on his father's tiny black and white television. Working at the stadium would be like working in a cathedral for him. Those early days were challenging. Carlos had to learn security protocols, crowd management, and emergency procedures. He studied harder than he had since school, carrying manuals home and practicing radio communications with Maria. She would quiz him on evacuation routes and incident reporting procedures while they ate dinner. His children, Elena and Miguel, initially teased him about becoming a football security guard at his age, but they soon realized how seriously their father took his new responsibility. The first time Lionel Messi walked past his checkpoint, Carlos felt his heart skip. The young Argentine player was already showing signs of the greatness that would make him a legend. Carlos wanted to ask for an autograph or a photo, but professionalism held him back. Instead, he simply nodded respectfully and said good evening in Spanish. Messi smiled and nodded back, a brief interaction that Carlos treasured for weeks afterward. As months turned into years, Carlos developed relationships throughout the stadium. He learned the names of cleaning staff, kitchen workers, groundskeepers, and administrative personnel. He discovered that football was much more than what happened on the pitch. It was a community of hundreds of people working together to create magic for millions of fans around the world. Carlos began to see his role not just as security, but as a guardian of that magic. The players began recognizing him too. They would greet him by name, ask about his family, and share small jokes during their daily arrivals and departures. Carlos never asked for special treatment or favors. He simply did his job with consistency and kindness, treating everyone from superstars to janitors with equal respect and genuine warmth. When the economic crisis hit Spain, Barcelona reduced staff and cut salaries. Carlos took a 20% pay reduction without complaint. He understood that the club was struggling, and he felt grateful to still have employment when many of his former construction colleagues were unemployed. Maria picked up extra shifts at the grocery store, and they tightened their budget even further. But they never considered leaving Barcelona. During this difficult period, Carlos noticed that some fans were struggling too. He saw families who clearly saved for months to attend a single match, children wearing worn jerseys that had been passed down from older siblings, elderly supporters who walked with difficulty but never missed a game. Carlos began small acts of kindness that no one tracked or recorded. He would help elderly fans navigate stairs, carry bags for parents juggling multiple children, and occasionally point struggling families toward areas where they might find discounted merchandise. The years passed, and Carlos became an institution. At Camp Nou, new employees were told to learn from Carlos if they wanted to understand what dedication looked like. Security supervisors used him as an example during training sessions. Fan forums occasionally mentioned the friendly guard at Gate 7 who always had time for a greeting or directions. Carlos never sought recognition for his work. He arrived early, stayed late when needed, and approached each day with the same professionalism he had brought to construction sites. His colleagues respected him, his supervisors trusted him, and the players appreciated his consistent presence. But Carlos remained largely invisible to the wider world, just another uniformed figure ensuring everyone else's experience remained smooth and enjoyable. The injury to his back never fully healed, and some mornings Carlos needed extra time to get moving. Maria would prepare warm compresses and remind him that retirement was an option now that their children had finished university and found good jobs. But Carlos always shook his head. Camp Nou had become more than his workplace. It was where he belonged, where he felt useful, where he could contribute to something larger than himself. This particular evening felt different somehow. Carlos noticed unusual activity around the stadium. Extra television crews were setting up equipment in areas that normally remained clear. Stadium officials were having more meetings than usual, gathering in small groups and speaking in hushed tones. Even the security coordinators seemed more energetic than typical, checking and rechecking schedules and protocols. Carlos assumed the heightened activity was related to the Champions League match scheduled for later in the week. Important games always brought additional media attention and security requirements. He had worked enough high-profile matches to recognize the signs of special preparations, though something about tonight felt particularly charged with anticipation. As he completed his pre-shift inspection, Carlos reflected on how much his life had changed since that first day 15 years ago. The scared, unemployed construction worker had evolved into a confident, respected member of the Barcelona family. His children now brought their own children to matches, and Carlos took special pride in showing his grandchildren around the stadium where their grandfather worked. The evening air carried the sounds of the city preparing for another night of football. Carlos could hear buses arriving with supporters, vendors setting up their stalls, and the general buzz of excitement that always preceded major events at Camp Nou. Soon the gates would open, and thousands of people would trust him to keep them safe while they celebrated their love for the beautiful game. Carlos straightened his uniform one final time and walked toward his assigned position. Whatever was different about tonight, he would meet it with the same dedication and professionalism that had defined his career. He had no way of knowing that this evening would become the most memorable night of his working life, or that his quiet years of service were about to be recognized in a way that would touch the hearts of football fans around the world. The morning sun filtered through the windows of the Barcelona training facility as Lionel Messi sat in the quiet conference room. He had returned to his beloved Camp Nou for a special ceremony honoring former players, but this visit felt different from his previous trips back to Catalonia. The weight of nostalgia mixed with purpose as he listened to Joan Laporta, the club president, discuss the evening's planned events. Messi had been living in Miami for over a year now, but Barcelona remained deeply embedded in his heart. Every return visit brought floods of memories from his legendary career with the club. Today, however, something unexpected was about to shift his focus from the past to the present, from the spotlight to the shadows where real dedication often lived unnoticed. As the meeting progressed, several club officials joined the discussion. They talked about the ceremony details, media obligations, and fan expectations. But when the conversation turned to operational matters, Messi found himself genuinely interested in learning about the current state of the club beyond just the football team. He asked questions about the staff, the facilities, and the people who made Camp Nou function day after day. Teresa Gonzalez, the head of stadium operations, was surprised by Messi's interest in what many considered mundane details. She began sharing stories about the dedicated employees who had served the club for decades. As she spoke, her voice grew warmer when she mentioned specific individuals who had gone above and beyond their duties, often without recognition or reward. The name Carlos Martinez came up naturally in the conversation. Teresa explained how Carlos had worked security for 15 years, through good times and difficult periods. She described his unwavering dedication during the pandemic when many staff members were furloughed, but Carlos continued reporting for duty even with reduced pay. His commitment to maintaining security protocols and helping the skeleton crew keep the stadium operational had been remarkable. I listened intently as Teresa shared more details about Carlos. He told him about the guard's habit of arriving early to ensure everything was perfect for each event. She mentioned how players over the years had come to appreciate Carlos's consistent presence and genuine warmth. Most touching were the stories of his small acts of kindness toward fans, especially elderly supporters and families who clearly struggled financially but still made enormous sacrifices to attend matches. Miguel Santos, the security supervisor, joined the conversation and added his own observations about Carlos. He explained how the veteran guard had become an unofficial mentor to new security staff, teaching them not just procedures but the importance of treating every person with dignity and respect. Miguel shared that Carlos had never called in sick unless absolutely necessary and had volunteered for extra shifts during major tournaments when the stadium hosted multiple events. The more Messi heard about Carlos, the more intrigued he became. Here was a man who had quietly served the club with the same dedication that players brought to the pitch, but without any of the recognition or rewards. Carlos represented something pure about football fandom and service that often got lost in the modern game's focus on money and celebrity. Dr. Elena Ramirez, the club's community outreach coordinator, shared additional insights about Carlos that moved Messi even more deeply. She explained how Carlos had personally helped during community events, staying late to ensure families with children got safely to their cars, and how he had learned basic English and French to better assist international visitors. His efforts went far beyond his job description, reflecting a genuine care for everyone who entered Camp Nou. The conversation revealed that Carlos had faced personal challenges over the years. His wife Maria had battled a serious illness recently, requiring expensive treatments not fully covered by insurance. Despite the financial strain and emotional stress, Carlos had maintained his positive attitude and professional excellence at Workers' colleagues had organized a small fund to help with medical expenses, but Carlos had been reluctant to accept assistance, preferring to handle his problems privately. Messi found himself deeply moved by these revelations. Throughout his career he had interacted with Carlos hundreds of times. The guard had always been professional, friendly, and respectful, but like many busy athletes, Messi had never taken time to learn about the man behind the uniform. Now, hearing about Carlos's character and dedication, Messi felt both admiration and regret for not recognizing such exemplary service sooner. The discussion sparked something in Messi's mind. He began thinking about the nature of recognition and appreciation in football. Players received enormous salaries, constant media attention, and worldwide fame for their contributions to the sport. But people like Carlos, who formed the foundation that made football experiences possible, remained largely invisible despite their crucial roles and personal sacrifices. As the meeting continued, Messi asked more questions about other long-serving staff members. He learned about groundskeepers who had maintained the Camp Nou pitch for decades, kitchen workers who prepared meals for players and staff, and cleaning crews who worked through the night to ensure the stadium sparkled for each event. Each story reinforced his growing awareness of the community of dedicated people who made his former club function. The idea began forming in Messi's mind during lunch break. Instead of participating in a standard ceremony focused on his own achievements, what if he could use his platform and visibility to highlight the unsung heroes of Camp Nou? What if the evening could become about recognizing people like Carlos, who embodied the true spirit of service and dedication to football? Messi approached Joan Laporta with his unconventional proposal. Rather than delivering a typical speech about his memories and gratitude, he wanted to do something different. He explained his desire to recognize the staff members who had served the club faithfully for years, without seeking spotlight or recognition. The club president was initially surprised but quickly embraced the idea, recognizing its potential to create a meaningful and unique moment. The logistics team began working frantically to adjust the evening's plans. Camera crews needed to be repositioned, media personnel had to be briefed about the change in format, and security had to coordinate new protocols for what was becoming a much more complex event than originally planned. The excitement among club officials was palpable as they realized they were about to witness something special. Word began spreading quietly through the stadium staff network. People who had worked alongside Carlos for years started learning that something involving him was planned for the evening. The speculation grew throughout the afternoon, though no one revealed specific details to Carlos himself. His colleagues wanted to preserve the surprise while enjoying their anticipation of seeing their respected friend finally receive recognition. Meanwhile, Carlos continued his normal routine, completely unaware of the extraordinary events being organized around him. He arrived at his usual time, checked his equipment, reviewed the evening's protocols, and prepared for what he assumed would be another standard ceremonial event. His biggest concern was ensuring that the increased media presence and crowd size didn't create security complications. As afternoon shifted toward evening, the energy around Camp Nou intensified. Staff members who normally worked in different areas found reasons to pass by the main entrance where Carlos was stationed. Social media accounts associated with Barcelona began posting cryptic messages about expecting something special. Though they provided no specific details that might spoil the surprise, the stage was being set for a moment that would transform Carlos's quiet evening of routine security work into something completely unexpected. Messi's recognition of dedicated service was about to converge with Carlos's years of faithful commitment in a way that would create lasting impact far beyond Camp Nou's walls. The foundation for an unforgettable encounter between football greatness and everyday heroism was solidly in place, waiting only for the right moment to unfold. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the Camp Nou plaza as Carlos Martinez completed his security checkpoint preparations. He arranged his equipment with the same methodical precision he had practiced for 15 years, ensuring his radio was properly charged, his incident report forms were organized, and his reflective vest sat perfectly straight. The familiar routine brought him comfort, a steady rhythm that had carried him through thousands of match days and special events. As Carlos adjusted his position near the main entrance, he began noticing unusual activity throughout the stadium grounds. Television trucks were arriving in greater numbers than typical for a ceremonial event. Camera crews were setting up equipment in locations that normally remained clear during such occasions. The technical staff seemed more energetic than usual, moving with purpose that suggested something significant was being prepared. Carlos watched a group of stadium officials gathering near the media entrance, their animated discussion punctuated by frequent gestures toward different areas of the complex. He recognized most of these people from years of working at Camp Nou, but their behavior today seemed different. They appeared excited about something, checking their watches and phones more frequently than normal circumstances would require. The security coordinator approached Carlos with revised instructions for the evening. Instead of his usual position monitoring the general admission area, he was asked to maintain his station near the main entrance throughout the entire event. The coordinator explained that special protocols were in effect for media management and crowd control. requiring experienced personnel in key locations. Carlos accepted the assignment without question, though he found it curious that such emphasis was being placed on this particular area. As early fans began arriving for the ceremony, Carlos noticed their behavior was also different from typical events. Many supporters were carrying phones and cameras, positioning themselves near his checkpoint rather than proceeding directly toward the stadium entrances. Small groups gathered nearby, speaking in excited whispers while occasionally glancing in his direction. Carlos assumed their attention was focused on potential celebrity arrivals or photo opportunities related to the evening's festivities. The crowd density around Carlos's position continued increasing throughout the afternoon. Fans who normally would have entered the stadium quickly were lingering in the plaza area, creating an atmosphere of anticipation that Carlos found puzzling. He began directing people to keep walkways clear and maintain proper flow patterns. His standard crowd management techniques, keeping the area organized despite the unusual congestion. Maria Santos, a longtime stadium employee who worked in guest services, approached Carlos during a brief break in crowd activity. She seemed unusually cheerful, asking about his family and commenting on what a beautiful evening it was becoming. Carlos appreciated the friendly conversation, though he noticed Maria appeared to be checking her phone frequently and seemed eager to discuss how long he had been working at Camp Nou. The conversation felt slightly forced, as if Maria was trying to fill time while waiting for something specific to happen. Carlos's radio crackled with increased chatter from other security positions throughout the complex. Coordinators were requesting frequent status updates and reminding all personnel to maintain heightened awareness for the evening's activities. The communication volume was significantly higher than normal for ceremonial events, suggesting complex logistics were being managed behind the scenes. The media presence intensified as evening approached. Carlos recognized several prominent sports journalists and television personalities arriving with their crews. Camera operators were positioning equipment with clear sightlines to his area, though Carlos assumed they were preparing to capture arrivals of important guests or dignitaries. I expected for the ceremony. He made sure to stay alert for any special vehicles or security details that might require his immediate attention. Luis Fernandez, the head groundskeeper, walked past Carlos's position and stopped for an unexpected conversation. Luis rarely left his field maintenance duties during events, but today he seemed interested in chatting about the weather, the crowd size, and Carlos's plans for the upcoming weekend. Like Maria earlier, Luis appeared unusually animated and kept checking his phone while they talked. Carlos enjoyed the friendly interaction but found it curious that so many colleagues were taking time to visit his station. The technical crews began conducting sound checks and equipment tests throughout the plaza area. Carlos could hear fragments of conversations about camera angles, lighting requirements, and coordination timing. The production seemed more elaborate than typical ceremonial events, with multiple camera positions and sophisticated audio equipment being deployed. Carlos made mental notes about the additional personnel and equipment locations, adjusting his security awareness accordingly. Young fans began approaching Carlos for photos and autographs, an unusual occurrence during his normal duties. While Carlos was always friendly with supporters, he typically remained in the background during events, focused on security rather than fan interaction. Today, however, families were specifically seeking him out, asking their children to pose with the friendly security guard. Carlos obliged politely while maintaining his professional demeanor, though he wondered why he was suddenly becoming a point of interest. Club officials made several passes through Carlos's area, ostensibly checking on crowd management and security protocols. However, their behavior seemed more observational than supervisory, as if they were confirming that everything was in proper position for something specific. Carlos reported that his area was secure and well organized, receiving approving nods and encouraging words that seemed disproportionate to his routine status updates. The evening's guest list began arriving, with former players, club executives, and dignitaries making their way toward the stadium. Carlos recognized many faces from his years at Camp Nou, greeting familiar figures with respectful nods and professional courtesy. Several former players stopped to shake his hand and exchange brief pleasantries, their interactions warmer and more personal than the usual quick acknowledgments during their active playing days. As the ceremony's start time approached, Carlos noticed that the crowd around his position had grown substantially. Fans were arranged in a semicircle formation that provided clear sightlines while maintaining proper security distances. Their excitement was palpable, with constant chatter about expecting something special to happen. Carlos remained focused on his duties while monitoring the unusual crowd dynamics carefully. The stadium's public address system began broadcasting announcements about the evening's program, building anticipation for the ceremonial event scheduled to begin shortly. Carlos listened to the scheduled details, noting that his area was mentioned as a gathering point for special activities. This information surprised him, as security checkpoints were typically background elements rather than focal points during ceremonies. Media photographers positioned themselves strategically around the plaza, their lenses focused on Carlos's checkpoint rather than the stadium entrances where important arrivals typically occurred. Carlos found their attention puzzling but maintained his professional composure, ensuring that his uniform was properly arranged and his demeanor remained appropriately serious for what was clearly becoming a significant event. The energy throughout Camp Nou reached a crescendo as final preparations were completed. Carlos could feel the anticipation in the air, a tangible excitement that seemed to center around his immediate area. While he remained uncertain about the specific reasons for all the unusual activity, his years of experience had taught him to trust his instincts and prepare for unexpected developments. Standing at his familiar post, Carlos embodied the quiet dignity and professional dedication that had defined his career. Unknown to him, his years of faithful service, consistent kindness, and unwavering commitment to excellence were about to be recognized in a way that would forever change how he viewed his role at Camp Nou. The convergence of preparation, anticipation, and appreciation was creating the perfect conditions for a moment that would resonate far beyond the stadium walls, touching hearts and inspiring recognition for the everyday heroes who make extraordinary experiences possible. The plaza lights illuminated Camp Nou as the ceremony officially began. Carlos stood at his checkpoint, watching the organized chaos of media crews, fans, and officials moving through the area with practiced efficiency. The crowd had grown larger than he expected for a ceremonial event, with supporters packed in orderly groups around his position. Their excited chatter filled the evening air as they waited for the program to begin. Carlos checked his radio one final time, ensuring clear communication with the security command center. The volume of coordination chatter had increased dramatically, with supervisors requesting constant updates from all positions. He confirmed that his area remained secure and properly organized, though the unusual attention his checkpoint was receiving continued to puzzle him. Through his earpiece, Carlos heard the ceremony director announcing that special activities would begin shortly at the main entrance plaza. This information surprised him, as his area was typically a functional checkpoint rather than a presentation space. He looked around at the gathered crowd, the positioned cameras, and the expectant faces of fans who seemed to know something he did not. The stadium's sound system crackled to life with an announcement in multiple languages. The ceremony was beginning with a tribute to the unsung heroes of FC Barcelona, people who had served the club with dedication and excellence behind the scenes. Carlos listened with interest, appreciating that the club was recognizing staff members who rarely received public acknowledgement for their contributions. As the announcement continued, Carlos noticed increased movement among the media crews. Camera operators were adjusting their positions, focusing their equipment more precisely on his immediate area. Photographers moved closer, their lenses trained on his checkpoint with an intensity that made him slightly uncomfortable. He had always preferred working quietly in the background, avoiding attention while ensuring everyone else's experience remained smooth. The crowd's energy shifted noticeably as official vehicles began arriving near the main entrance. Carlos prepared for the arrival of dignitaries or special guests, adjusting his position to maintain proper security protocols while accommodating the media presence. He recognized several club officials emerging from the vehicles, but their behavior seemed different from typical ceremonial arrivals. Joan Laporta, the club president, approached the temporary speaking area that had been set up near checkpoint. His presence immediately drew cheers from the assembled fans, who began chanting Barcelona songs and displaying their support banners. Carlos maintained his professional focus, while keeping one eye on the crowd dynamics and another on the potential security implications of the gathering. The president began speaking about the importance of recognizing excellence in all its forms throughout the Barcelona family. He talked about dedication, service, and the people who embodied the club's values through their daily work rather than through goals scored or trophies won. Carlos found the speech moving, thinking about his own colleagues who deserved recognition for their years of faithful service. As Laporta continued his remarks, Carlos noticed more activity near the players' entrance. A familiar figure emerged from one of the official vehicles, immediately causing a massive reaction from the crowd. Lionel Messi had arrived, and the plaza erupted in cheers, songs, and emotional displays from fans who had not expected to see their beloved former captain at what was supposed to be a routine ceremonial event. Messi's presence transformed the atmosphere completely. Fans pressed forward for better views, cameras focused intensely on his every movement, and the general excitement level increased exponentially. Carlos immediately shifted into heightened security mode, ensuring that crowd control barriers remained intact and that proper safety distances were maintained around the presentation area. The Argentine superstar looked different than Carlos remembered from their regular interactions during his playing days. There was a thoughtful quality to his demeanor, a purposefulness that suggested this visit was about more than just making an appearance. Messi walked slowly through the plaza, acknowledging fans with waves and smiles, but his attention seemed focused on something specific rather than the general crowd appreciation. Carlos watched as Messi approached the speaking area, noting that, in a respectful way, he greeted stadium officials and staff members. The player had always been professional and courteous during their brief interactions over the years, but tonight he seemed particularly engaged with the people around him. Carlos appreciated seeing that Messi's fame had not diminished his genuine appreciation for the Barcelona community. The club president introduced Messi to thunderous applause, explaining that the football legend had requested to participate in this evening's tribute to dedicated staff members. This announcement surprised Carlos, as he had not realized that player participation was planned for what he understood to be a routine recognition ceremony. The crowd's excitement reached new heights as they anticipated hearing from their beloved former captain. Messi took the microphone and began speaking in Spanish, his voice carrying clearly through the plaza sound system. He talked about his years at Barcelona and the many people who had contributed to making Camp Nou a special place. His words were thoughtful and sincere, focusing on the importance of recognizing excellence in all its forms throughout the club structure. As Messi spoke, Carlos noticed that several staff members were gathering near the presentation area. He recognized colleagues from various departments, people who had worked at Camp Nou for many years without seeking recognition or rewards. Their presence suggested that this ceremony was indeed focused on honoring long-serving employees, which Carlos found both appropriate and overdue. The speech took an unexpected turn when Messi began talking about specific individuals who had impressed him with their dedication and character. He mentioned learning about staff members who had gone above and beyond their duties, who had served the club through difficult times, and who had treated everyone with respect and kindness regardless of their position or status. Carlos found to himself moved by Messi's words about the importance of recognizing people who made extraordinary contributions through ordinary daily work. The message resonated with his own philosophy about service and dedication, values he had tried to embody throughout his career at Barcelona. He felt proud to be part of an organization that was taking time to acknowledge the efforts of behind-the-scenes employees. The atmosphere in the plaza became increasingly emotional as Messi's speech continued. Fans were listening intently, many wiping away tears as they heard their hero speaking about values that extended far beyond football performance. The moment felt authentic and meaningful, a genuine tribute to the people who formed the foundation of the Barcelona experience. As Messi concluded his general remarks, Carlos noticed a subtle shift in the crowd's attention. People were beginning to look more directly at his area, their expression suggesting anticipation of something specific about to happen. The cameras had maintained their focus on his checkpoint throughout the speech, and now their attention seemed even more concentrated. Carlos felt a growing sense that he was somehow connected to the evening's events in a way he did not yet understand. The convergence of Messi's presence, the focus on dedicated staff members, and the unusual attention his position was receiving created a situation that felt both familiar and completely unprecedented. His years of experience had taught him to trust his instincts, and every instinct was telling him that something extraordinary was about to unfold. The plaza fell silent as Messi paused in his remarks, creating a moment of anticipation that seemed to stretch across the entire gathering. Carlos stood at his checkpoint, maintaining his professional demeanor while feeling the weight of hundreds of eyes focused in his direction. The evening that had begun as routine security duty was clearly evolving into something that would forever change his understanding of recognition, appreciation, and the true meaning of service to the Barcelona community. The silence in the plaza stretched for what felt like an eternity as Messi held the microphone, his eyes scanning the crowd before settling on a specific area near the main entrance. Carlos felt the weight of attention focusing on his position. Though he still could not understand why hundreds of people seemed to be looking directly at him, his heart began beating faster as the realization slowly dawned that whatever was about to happen involved him personally. Messi's voice broke the silence with words that would forever change Carlos's life. He began speaking about a specific individual who had served Barcelona with extraordinary dedication for 15 years, a man who arrived early and stayed late, who treated every person with equal respect regardless of their status, who had continued working through personal hardships and financial difficulties because of his love for the club and commitment to excellence. As Messi described this person's character and service, Carlos felt a strange sensation in his chest. The details were too specific, too personal, too accurate to be about anyone else. The crowd's attention had shifted completely to his checkpoint, and he could see people pointing in his direction while nodding in recognition of Messi's words. The truth was becoming undeniable, though it felt impossible to believe. The football legend continued his tribute, sharing stories that could only have come from detailed conversations with club officials who knew Carlos's history intimately. Messi spoke about the security guard who had learned multiple languages to help international visitors, who had quietly assisted elderly fans and struggling families, who had mentored new employees and maintained perfect attendance despite personal challenges. Carlos felt tears forming in his eyes as he listened to his own story being told by one of the greatest footballers in history. The description of his dedication, his kindness, and his unwavering professionalism was accurate in every detail. but hearing it spoken aloud in front of hundreds of people felt surreal and overwhelming. He had never sought recognition for simply doing his job well. Yet here was Lionel Messi praising him publicly. The crowd erupted in applause as Messi announced that he wanted to personally recognize Carlos Martinez, the security guard who embodied the true spirit of Barcelona through his daily service. The cheers grew louder as Messi gestured toward Carlos's position, inviting him to join the presentation area. Carlos stood frozen for a moment, unable to process that this incredible honor was actually happening to him. Stadium officials approached Carlos's checkpoint, gently encouraging him to walk toward the speaking area where Messi was waiting. Carlos's legs felt unsteady as he moved through the crowd, which parted respectfully to create a clear path. Fans reached out to touch his shoulders and arms as he passed, offering words of congratulations and appreciation in multiple languages. Their genuine warmth and enthusiasm helped calm his nerves as he approached the most surreal moment of his life. Messi stepped forward to meet Carlos halfway, extending his hand with a smile that conveyed both respect and genuine affection. As they shook hands, the plaza exploded with cheers, camera flashes, and emotional reactions from fans who were witnessing something truly special. Carlos looked into Messi's eyes and saw sincerity that made this moment feel authentic rather than staged or artificial. The football legend placed his arm around Carlos's shoulders, bringing him closer to the microphone so they could address the crowd together. Messi explained to the gathering that Carlos represented the thousands of dedicated people who made football possible, whose contributions often went unnoticed despite being essential to the sport's magic. He emphasized that true greatness came in many forms, including the quiet excellence that Carlos had demonstrated throughout his career. Carlos found his voice and spoke briefly into the microphone, thanking Messi and the club for this unexpected honor. His words were simple and heartfelt, expressing gratitude for the opportunity to serve Barcelona and appreciation for his colleagues who worked alongside him every day. He mentioned his family, particularly his wife Maria, who had supported him through all the challenges and celebrations of his career at Camp Nou. The crowd responded with sustained applause as Carlos spoke, many fans wiping away tears as they witnessed this genuine moment of recognition. The atmosphere was electric yet deeply emotional, combining the excitement of seeing Messi with the touching nature of honoring an ordinary man who had done extraordinary work. Social media immediately began buzzing with photos and videos of the unexpected tribute, spreading the story far beyond Barcelona. Messi presented Carlos with a special Barcelona jersey bearing his name and the number 15, representing his years of service to the club. The gesture was simple yet profound, symbolizing Carlos's official recognition as an important member of the Barcelona family. Carlos held the jersey with trembling hands, overwhelmed by the significance of receiving such a gift from his football hero. The ceremony continued with both men addressing questions from media representatives who had gathered to document this unique event. Carlos answered with characteristic humility, emphasizing that he had simply done his job to the best of his ability and that many other staff members deserved similar recognition. Messi reinforced the importance of acknowledging people like Carlos, who formed the foundation of football excellence. As the formal presentation concluded, Carlos found himself surrounded by well-wishers from throughout the Barcelona community. Former players, current staff members, club officials, and fans all wanted to congratulate him and share their own stories of his kindness and professionalism over the years. The outpouring of appreciation was overwhelming, revealing how many lives he had touched through his quiet acts of service. The evening's events were captured by dozens of cameras and shared across social media platforms worldwide. Videos of Messi honoring Carlos quickly went viral, inspiring discussions about the importance of recognizing everyday heroes and the value of faithful service in all professions. Comments poured in from football fans around the globe, praising both Messi's gesture and Carlos's example of dedication. Local news outlets picked up the story immediately, conducting interviews with Carlos and featuring segments about his years of service at Camp Nou. National sports programs included the tribute in their coverage, using it as an example of positive values in football that extended far beyond winning and losing. International media also covered the story, highlighting it as a heartwarming example of recognition and appreciation. As the crowd began dispersing and the cameras were packed away, Carlos stood in the plaza holding his special jersey and reflecting on the most extraordinary evening of his life. The routine security shift that had begun like thousands of others had transformed into a moment of recognition that he would treasure forever. More importantly, the experience had validated his belief that dedication and kindness mattered, even when they seemed to go unnoticed. Carlos returned to his checkpoint to collect his equipment, but now everything felt different. Colleagues approached throughout the evening to congratulate him. Fans continued seeking photos and autographs, and his radio crackled with warm messages from security personnel throughout the stadium. His quiet corner of Camp Nou had become a symbol of excellence and recognition that would inspire others for years to come. The drive home to Maria was filled with phone calls from his children, grandchildren, and friends who had seen the ceremony. Coverage on television and social media Carlos could barely believe that his ordinary life had intersected with global attention in such a positive way. The recognition felt wonderful, but more meaningful was the validation that his approach to work and life had been noticed and appreciated by people he respected. That as Carlos finally arrived home and shared the evening's events with Maria, they both understood that this moment represented more than personal recognition. It symbolized the importance of faithful service, the value of treating others with respect, and the truth that greatness comes in many different forms. The security guard who had simply tried to do his job well had become an inspiration to millions of people around the world.